All right, well, we will get started on time as we always do. I think most of you know me at this point. If not, I'm Peggy Kuiper. I'm the Director of Sport and Recreation Business for UAF. And I just wanted to say welcome to everybody. Special thanks to Michelle and Spencer for setting up this great event. And special thanks to John, Justin, and Ashley for being our awesome panelists that we're going to hear from tonight. And I think it's especially impressive the experience that these three bring to the table with esports. So very excited for that. And as always, thank you to Mark. Mark, if you could give a wave, our Dean, Mark Herman, for supporting all the eSport initiatives that have happened on campus since the original summit, 2 or 3 years ago, which John Spiher was a part of. So I'll leave it there. And Michelle, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Peggy. And thank you guys for joining and spending a Monday evening with us. I know usually we're a little bit later in the week, but wanted to be respectful of everyone's holiday plans. So hopefully we are entering a very happy, healthy, and safe holiday season after we hop off this call this evening. But I am so excited for this panel. I couldn't contain my excitement, and when we were meeting just before this, like Peggy said, the three that are on this panel, John, Ashley, and Justin, are just phenomenal. One, humans, and two, in their field in esports. I know working in sports, I have a ton of questions about esports. So I am so excited to dive into all of yours and my questions, and we can get a nice view of what the landscape is like in esports and where it's going, because it is blowing up and it's catching fire, and it's only going to continue to do that. By way of a very short introduction, I am in corporate partnership marketing at the Dallas Cowboys, going into my third season. So I live in Frisco, Texas, and excuse me. And I also am an adjunct professor in the sports business program with Peggy. So excited to be with you all. And a few just housekeeping rules. If you've been on these, then you've heard them. In our last iteration of the fall panel seminar, it's just if you don't mind keeping your microphone on mute while the panelists are speaking, just so we don't have any feedback or any noise that would be interrupting. And also utilize the chat box for questions throughout. We'll try and get to as many as we can, but I know you guys submitted some really good questions in your RSVPs, but please submit some as time goes on. We want to be able to answer everybody's questions. And so without further ado, I will let the panelists introduce themselves and just give your name, description of your organization, background, a little bit about what you do, and then we'll dive into the whole landscape of esports as much as we can in the next 60 minutes. So Ashley, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ashley Chalk. I am the VP of Partnerships at Complexity Gaming. I've had the pleasure of being with that organization throughout this year. About 17 years in working in the sports and entertainment industry, always in partnership sales. Absolutely love it. Always knew I was going to work in the sports and live entertainment industry in some capacity or another growing up, and found my niche in taking the creative aspect and being able to marry that with some really amazing organizations and creating some fantastic programs. Based in Dallas, Texas. When someone asks me where I'm from, I always say it's wherever my parents were growing up. We lived internationally and all over the place, so really took some wonderful experiences from that for my childhood that allow me to have some unique conversations when meeting new folks to develop those partnerships. So excited to be here and answer all the questions as best as possible for you all today.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it. Justin, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks so much, Michelle, for having me. Very excited about this topic. I could ramble on about esports for a very long time, as my girlfriend knows, but no, I'm a senior manager of partnerships for Forefront's a sports marketing agency based in Chicago, but we have offices in Dallas and in Denver. I've been on the Forefront team for about 4.5 years. Before that was with the Chicago Bulls for a short stint after graduating from undergrad at Ohio University, originally from Lincoln, Rhode Island, so very far east, East Coaster, born and raised. But I've been with Forefront for about 4.5 years. We specialize in 4 core competencies or verticals in analytics, digital, innovation, and partnership sales. And partnership sales has been the vertical of mine for the past 4.5 years with the organization. And really have grown to love being a strategic storyteller, and have had the pleasure of working on a number of different esports initiatives and projects from our perspective with incredible teams like Complexity Gaming, like Evil Geniuses, and with some awesome arenas and facilities in Esports Arena Arlington and Full Sail University and their esports facility down there in Orlando, Florida. So very excited about the topic, and excited to talk to you all, and hopefully can answer some questions and have a great conversation.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate you being here. All right, John, that leaves you to round us out.
Yeah, I guess it does. Hey, everybody. John Spiher here. I work for Dignitas, which is also an esports organization. We have teams in 6 different games that compete all over the world. I've worked in the esports space for about 12 years, predominantly working on the team side, helping bringing brands and partnerships to life. I've also been pretty deeply ingrained in the philanthropy side, sitting board member of a mental health charity called Rise Above the Disorder that provides free mental health services for those who can't afford it otherwise. Gamers Outreach that builds mobile gaming kiosks for children's hospitals all over the world. But I've worked in partnership sales and activations for the greater part of a decade or two, and really excited to talk more about all things esports with you all.
Well, thank you guys again. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to chat with us. And I am not going to hold us up any further. We're just going to go ahead and dive right in because this topic is so exciting. So, if you look at the esports landscape in the US, it's, like I mentioned before, it is rapidly growing. So I would love to hear from each of you. Justin, we'll start with you. How would you, if you were talking to somebody who had no idea what esports is, how would you describe it to them if they've never heard of it and we're just getting introduced to the concept?
Yeah, so I'll try and give a brief version of that as much as I could be long-winded with that answer. I think esports is the merger of video games and casual gaming with professional ambition. And essentially, there are a number of different avenues to being a professional in esports, and whether that be in content creation and streaming, competitive teams like you have with Complexity and Dignitas, Evil Geniuses, 100 Thieves, and a number of others. And there's also opportunities on the business side in the roles that, similar to Ashley and John, in having the opportunity to work in, the more business back end of an esports organization. But I think it's one of probably the fastest growing, version of sports right now that's out there, and one of the best industries to get involved in right now. And I think it's definitely at its simplest form, just a combination of casual gaming and video games with professional ambition to develop new opportunities in sports and esports. But would love to hear Ashley's and John's take on that as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in here. Yeah, pretty in line with that definition, right? It's the intersection between competition, community, and gaming holistically, right? Esports describes the world of organized competitive video gaming, which I think is a really important part, but so much of that is focused on the actual entertainment and content value of games holistically, paired with the energy and interaction and engagement of the fan base.
Yeah, I think Justin and John pretty much covered the gamut on that. Not to, dumb it down by any means whatsoever, but I feel like a lot of times too, I'm either convincing, folks what it really means and what it can entail. And I quite frankly just start out and say, yes, you can get paid to play video games. Yes, you can actually get scholarships to go to college now around the video game industry. But it's esports, and what I try to do is try to compare it to, because a lot of folks that you're speaking to about esports typically will have an understanding of traditional sports. So I'll start there and trying to share like an analogy, right? Like you have the NBA or NFL and you have a bunch of teams that are competing in that standpoint, and really start to create those points of connectivity. But then as Justin and John alluded to, that it just goes much deeper into what the diversity is that an esports team can bring to the table for a particular brand to activate in beyond just the competitive landscape.
Well, I think the point you made there, Ashley, is really important, and something I would actually love to dive into with all three of you is creating those connection points with your traditional sports, right? So, Justin, I'll start with you on this one as well. You know, we connected the other day and we talked a lot about the informative sell that has to go on with esports, right? So I would say 100% of people on this call know what the NFL is, right? They know that there are teams within the NFL, the Cowboys being one of them. And Tom knows what the NFL is. I like the thumbs up. Therese, I love these button interactions. Keep using those. Those are fun. So the problem with these sports is that I think there's a lack of understanding in how teams like Complexity or Dignitas interact with, is there a governing body? Like, who is the NFL of esports? Or, you know, who do you answer to? Who oversees all of it? Because, you know, I work in sports and I think that's a really tough, that's a tough code to crack. I know, for me at least. So I know you made a great analogy the other day, and I would love if you could share that with the group as well.
Yeah, sure thing. And I would definitely am intrigued to hear Ashley's and John's take on this, given their background. But I think the way we've always talked about it when we're, we work with Evil Geniuses, and on their behalf, our goal is to garner new partnerships, to garner and talk to new partners and potential prospects. So selling for them. And the way we've always approached it is we realize that a lot of brands have the idea of esports as something we should be involved in. No idea what that looks like, and it's always changing. So it's unique to the way that we've normally approached it, in being more educational and informative, and kind of giving a esports 101, if you will, of here's what it looks like, and finding, to Ashley's point, those kind of points of relation. And I think the one that I use when I'm specifically talking about the team atmosphere with Evil Geniuses is looking at it like kind of an NCAA athletic department. So, you have University of Alaska Fairbanks, and under that you have a number of different teams that play under that school name. So in basketball and hockey and volleyball, et cetera. And with Evil Geniuses, it's a similar setup. You have an overarching organization, and then you have individual teams that participate in different types of games and different types of leagues within that. So that could be Dota 2, could be League of Legends, it could be Counter-Strike, and the list goes on and on. But I think from a structural perspective, specifically looking at the teams, you should look at it, or I tend to look at it like, an athletic department, and having one overarching, kind of organization, and then individual teams within that participate in their own kind of avenues or leagues.
I think it's really helpful, at least for me, to be able to picture the flow chart, if you will. John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say, the strongest analogy isn't to compare, the NFL to esports, but to compare sports to esports, right? You have multiple different titles. You have golf, you have baseball, basketball, soccer, so on. Esports is the same way. The core difference being, as Justin said, you normally have one parent company that controls a variety of different competitive teams that all fly under one banner. Now, some publishers are taking the approach of having people generate new franchisee names to remove that dissemination, make it a little bit easier. For instance, Activision Blizzard with the Overwatch League or the Call of Duty League, they said, hey, you guys can participate in this, but you're going to need to add a city to your name. You're going to add a geographical identity, and you're going to have to create a new brand name, right? Normally, that isn't the case. For us at Dignitas, we have a team in Clash Royale, in Valorant, in League of Legends, in Rocket League. We have an all-female team that competes across. We have 8 teams in total that compete across 6 different games, but it's all within the greater Dignitas banner. So.
Yeah, and that, just to build off of John, just to continue on that, I mean, that's Complexity. It's the same setup from that standpoint. We have 9 different gaming titles that we compete in. But it's the continuation, like I shared, of diversifying our portfolio. And for us, that's a really big benefit for brands to be able to come in with a team like ourselves or Dignitas, et cetera, that have, teams in these variety of titles that crosses over from console to PC, FIFA, sports, and 2 first-person shooter games. So it really then gives a broader scope from a demo for brands to evaluate. But I think even more so now, it's going beyond just the competitive set, right? Everybody wants to be affiliated with a winning team. But I feel like the continued evolution of esports and where it keeps going with the lifestyle aspect. For us at Complexity, we started creating a content creator team. So earlier this year, we started signing folks that aren't focused on just the competitive landscape and going into these big competitions, but creating content representing Complexity from that piece. And that's been a really great benefit for us, and hoping that we continue to build on that, because it really allows brands to have a different voice outside of just the competitive team, that teams, talent, et cetera, that's representing that respective organization. So yeah, it's a unique dynamic in so many different layers, which is why, when Justin or John and I start these conversations with potential brands, you can start up here to 30,000, but you need to quickly make sure you don't scare them off too quickly, because there's just so many different entry points into this space, and you want to get laser focused quickly to make sure you don't overwhelm them. And you can tell the story of your respective organization very clearly, so they know how to best navigate those waters.
I think that's really helpful. And Ashley, when you talk about having to start up here, when you talk to brands that maybe only have a minimal understanding, that they know they want to be involved in esports, they don't know how, they don't know really what that even means. They probably look to you guys, a lot of you in the positions that you're in, for a large education component, but we all know time kills deals, right? So how do you do that? How do you approach that strategically when there is such a large educational component, but you have to close the deal quickly, just in the nature of sales?
Yeah, it's just, I think Justin said at the beginning, it's I'm speaking from a non-endemic standpoint, right? They want to be in this space, they believe they should be in this space, but oftentimes they don't know, where that starting point is. And the reality is too, most of these, VP of brands, CMOs, et cetera, are receiving tons of pitches from all of us at all the different teams. So it's really starting to quickly identify your points of differentiation. You can have a great talent roster, but it goes beyond that, right? You're not always going to have a winning season. So what else are you bringing to the table? And so at Complexity, we were fortunate. Complexity is one of the longest standing esports organizations in North America. It's been around 16 plus years. Jason Lake, our CEO, was one of the founders. And in 2017, we went through the acquisition with the Cowboys organization. So that brought on a unique dynamic for us to go through a rebrand and start to develop a new narrative, creating new pillars. So we're only about 2.5, 3 years in from that happening, and we really are reestablishing ourselves in a lot of those senses, and we have our 5 pillars, outside of the competitive landscape, things like innovation, and really leveraging aspects at Complexity, such as our headquarters. So as a result of that acquisition, Complexity was very fortunate to have this incredible headquarters built right across the street from the Cowboys headquarters. It's 11,000 square feet plus, and it's state-of-the-art facility for our players to come and practice there, our content creators to come in there. But it's also a facility that, when it's not a wonderful pandemic, it's open to the public 7 days a week. And so we just started scratching the surface on that. And that is an extension of the education of esports, and having that understanding of what goes into the behind the scenes of this aspect for this competitive set, which a lot of people don't realize from that. So it's really that peek behind the curtain that we're able to put out there, especially with a point of differentiation like our headquarters.
I've been in the Complexity headquarters, and I can attest that it is truly amazing. And, there really is a large educational component to it, because, Ashley, I think you were there when we took the tour, and I didn't know that gamers were more, they were able to get blood clots because they're sitting so long. So, and their legs. So they have a whole PT area with these amazing like recovery boots, and they have a whole recovery lounge. And is it the porch is what it's called, Ashley?
Yes, it is. And yeah, and that's one of the things that a lot of people just don't think it goes hand in hand, but there is a health and wellness from the mental component that obviously John referenced, and there's some incredible work being done within our space to ensure that that mental piece is a focal point as well as the physical aspect. And that's something too that with having that relationship with the Cowboys, that we're able to provide our talent access to where the Cowboys train. They get to go eat at the Cowboys training table where the players eat. So there's just some really great things for us, making sure that our talent is a priority.
Yeah, I think it's a great portion of it. And John, I think you had something to add to that. I saw you come off mute for a second.
Yeah, no, it's a variety of things, right? To kind of go back to the core part of why, 50, 60, 70% of my job is education, right? If I can't help brands make an effective and informed decision, then I failed at my job. In a lot of ways, my team, Dignitas holistically, we exist to be strategic guides in this space. When it comes to brands like Verizon, Fortune 50 company, we're their first foray into gaming. Susquehanna International Group, we're their first foray into gaming. And we help them craft strategies for them to find efficacy in the space based on whatever their goals are, because we have to listen, understand, and really hit home on those KPIs. And back to the point of facilities, absolutely agreed. We've been in the process of building a 5G gaming center alongside Verizon for the last year, and we're really excited to really look into the future of how do the people of tomorrow, how do the fans of tomorrow, how do the players of tomorrow experience things like retail or digital events, which is really convenient now because that's all that exists. How do they experience training and biometrics and all of these core pieces of technology that we have pretty unique access to by working with Verizon directly. But it's such a big piece in really trying to develop strong reasons forward for a brand, and part of that is creating a good amount of education in a short amount of time. Obviously, sales cycles can happen rapidly. At the same time, there are brands that we talk to for a period of 3 to 4 to 8 months prior to making any kind of decision or paperwork. Why? Because we want to make sure it's the right decision. It's not my job to get the biggest check that I can from a brand, have it fail, and know that I'm not going to renew them, right? It's my job to really build a legacy in esports partnerships. When you look at HEB, for instance, so I worked with the Houston Outlaws prior to this team, and we brought in Texas local grocery store called HEB. And looking at them, it's, hey, how do they approach hitting 35 plus years working alongside the Spurs, or 50 plus years with the Rockets, and so on? How do we build that kind of legacy for a brand in esports? And that's always our goal. It's really crafting something that can stand the test of time and create entire generations of fan bases around. And that very much starts with education.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate everything that Ashley and John have shared so far. The things that I've added, I think the main thing that from our end is just finding the ways to create that strategic alignment using data analytics of showcasing, kind of, EGs or Evil Geniuses fans, and how they really align with the values of whomever we're speaking to, and even more so on that, talking about how EG's values in gaming, align with kind of the values of whomever we're talking to create, kind of those long-standing partnerships and partner relationships that are not meant to be any sort of logo slap or something where you're just inputting brand X here and it doesn't feel like you're adding true value. And to John's point, creating and showcasing the actual ROI of a partnership. I think regardless of esports or any avenue, whether that be in the NFL, MLB, esports, brands are so close to every dollar they spend now that there's true value in being able to showcase what the ROI is that you're delivering on, and being able to do that consistently, that I think it actually does add a lot of value for esports organizations to be able to do that. And to John's point again, being in a digital world that we're in currently, I think they're in a very good spot to be able to do so more than some of the other leagues that they're kind of competing with for, the audience. And the last thing, and I think Ashley kind of honed in on this with talking about Complexities HQ, is I think one of the biggest keys to growing esports from an educational component is kind of creating community touch points. And, I think, Michelle, we talked about it, but, the new esports arena and facility and HQ for Team Envy in Charlotte is going to be one that, I think they're going to continue to build on those community touch points. I think a lot of esports organizations have a global fan base already. It's kind of like the reverse of, what is MLB and NBA, of how those teams are trying to get international exposure, when esports organizations, like, they're big, they have that reach already, but it's about how do you create kind of the educational, informative, and community touch points that really, I think, matters. Personally, I'll speak for myself in saying that, but I think it will come down to it in the long run, and if you put every organization in a good spot for future success, creating those community touch points.
Yeah, and Justin, when you talk about those community touch points, I think of, just because we're so close to it, actually, I think of Complexity, where, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, that public space in the front of your headquarters is open for the community to come try and play new games that they may not have access to otherwise, or may not have purchased yet, or just become more familiar with the esports world. And I think there's also while you're educating the youth, there's probably a really big educational component with the parent to saying, like you said before, you can make money doing this, you can get a scholarship doing this. So I think having such an open, facility to allow families to come almost experience this together is huge. So yeah, Ashley, feel free to add that if you'd like.
Yeah, and the fortunate, unfortunate part is our headquarters was not even open up for an entire year before the lovely pandemic hit. So we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on, first and foremost, monetizing that place and really utilizing it as an effective touch point within the community, and creating that awareness and having those relationships with even the minor league baseball team down the road, the Frisco Rough Riders, and those things matter, from that, and creating that community awareness. But yeah, it's the front third of the facility. And, we did successfully run a couple of summer camps. So that's big, connecting with the school system. So outside of just the day-to-day consumer, to being able to connect with the schools and have that facility to supplement programs that are launching. So again, it's exciting for the fact that we've just begun with how we're going to continue to utilize that facility for the community and for consumers and fans, outside of it serving its purpose for our talent.
Yeah, to add on one quick note here, right? Echoing back what they both said, esports is inherently global. So our next step is localization, right? Even if it's a specific market, or in Complexity's case, having a core Dallas-focused identity, that's important for them. For the franchises in Overwatch League and Call of Duty League, having specific regional identity as part of their brand identity is important. But holistically, offering fans the ability to tangibly experience a brand that otherwise they can only view or engage with digitally is extremely important. And that's going to be a huge focus for just about every single esports organization, specifically through collegiate, through high school, middle school, and even potentially lower, and just really rallying the respective localized communities for wherever their facilities are. For us, we're owned by Harris Pulitzer Sports and Entertainment, so our actual headquarters is in New Jersey, across the street from the Prudential Center. So we work with the Devils and the Sixers, as well as being a franchisee in Riot. We need to have our League of Legends teams based in LA. So we have two facilities, and being able to do things where you can have, fans in Los Angeles play a game digitally against fans from New Jersey and activate both of those fan bases is just a really intriguing opportunity that we're trying to do more with. Obviously, right as we develop those resources, same as Ashley, the pandemic hit. So we're excited to see what things look like after that, after all of these amazing vaccines. But localization and really activating offline for esports is paramount to the future success of us in the greater sports and entertainment ecosystem.
Those great insight. So thank you guys for sharing. You know, I haven't totally considered the localization piece of it. So I think that's a really important takeaway from today's panel, is how important that piece is, along with your global fan base for each of your teams and clients that you work with. Excuse me, backing out of the team piece for a moment, I think there's a really important component of esports that I've logged on to, admittedly, but still don't totally understand. Can we talk about Twitch and some of the other platforms that you guys use, or that your product is streamed on? Because again, admittedly, I've dipped my toe in the water there, but I think I could really use some experts to talk through this, and I hope some others on the call are with me on this one. And thank you, Amanda. So, John, do you want to start off there and just share with us just the business relationship here, and what the purpose of it is?
Yeah, let me take one step backward. So let's talk about how fans engage with talent, specifically from a competitive side, right? If you look at the average Cowboys player, you're going to see them X amount of hours on a weekend on the field and in that field of play. And that's really how you engage and experience that player for the most part. Many are starting to increase their social following, but it's not a core part of who they are as athletes. When it comes to esports, that world is completely different. You have, multiple matches that take place every single weekend for many of these teams and players. But on top of that, a big part of being that influencer, that digital personality, is you're also going to see them streaming nearly every day. You're going to be able to engage with them on platforms like Twitch, Huya, Facebook, YouTube, and so many others. And through that, from a brand perspective, because I know that's the lens that many of us on the panel are speaking through, it provides a unique amount of additional touch points and ways that we can activate brands. And that's really intriguing. But that's because from a fan experience, there are all these new and additional ways and pieces of content to engage those respective fan bases. So when it comes to being a professional content creator or a professional esports athlete, Twitch is kind of the core for many. You have your other streaming platforms like YouTube TV, if that's where your core fan base is. Facebook has their streaming platform. Looking abroad, you have a variety of them. For us, we have a partnership with Huya, which is a Chinese streaming platform where we can continue to grow our international fan base, specifically in China. On top of that, you have, your social focused platforms like, TikTok is a huge emerging platform. Snapchat, regardless of it not being in the news anymore, is still a huge emerging platform. And then your Instagrams, Twitters, and so on. But so much live and broadcast content is such a huge piece of how we engage our fans, how we activate our brands, and how we really build a community around sports and entertainment.
So that was very helpful. So if I am, and I don't want to keep drawing these comparisons to traditional sports, but if I am thinking from a team's perspective, the TV deal is with the league. So is it a more direct, like streaming platform to team deal that happens in esports, or is it you get to choose what platforms you can be on, whether it's YouTube TV, Twitch, and Huya, or is it one or the other? Talk us through that a little bit.
So the quick answer is it depends, right? So at the league level, you will still have your major, $300 million valuation broadcasting rights and media rights partnership that happens at the league level. That means for direct field of play, that is happening on whatever platform buys those rights. At the team level, you might have a partnership with Twitch or Facebook, or we had one with Caffeine previously that says, hey, you're going to create shoulder content specifically and or exclusively on this respective platform. And then thirdly, down at the individual level, depending on a team's partnership, you as a player or as a content creator either go with wherever your team has that affiliation, and or you have the capacity to create an individual partnership as well. So because of the sheer volume of share of voice in the marketplace that Twitch has, nearly every esports professional in the West goes with Twitch because you have a higher ceiling of viewership, you have a higher potential of earning because of that user base, and that's a strong place to go. It's not the same in every region, but at least in North America.
When you say league, is that essentially a game?
So let's go back to the NFL analogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for League of Legends, which is created by Riot Games, the NFL equivalent is the LCS, the League Championship Series. So that is a league that curates all matches twice a weekend from one team to the next, standings for those respective teams, player unions for those respective teams, mandatory minimum salaries, and so many different stipulations, creating the organization behind that competitive league and ecosystem. So our NFL at Dignitas, at least from the League of Legends standpoint, is LCS. Now, for every game, you might have a different NFL. For Counter-Strike, there are multiple NFLs. It's if the NFL, AFL, XFL, and really every other football-related league could happen and coexist that also had talent from different football teams at any given time in multiple leagues at the same time, which gets a little bit convoluted. But our main league is one that we actually co-own. It's called Flashpoint. That is our NFL for Counter-Strike. Valorant, which is an emerging esport, they just had their first effectively iteration of their NFL, which was called First Strike. So when we go into leagues, what we mean is a systemized series of competitive play over a dedicated series or duration of time.
Got it. Well, that sounds like a lot to keep track of when it comes to governance and regulations and memos. And I think if we had multiple NFLs to answer to, it would be a challenge.
The beauty of it is most of them operate on a calendar year system, the same way that many of our traditional sports do. League of Legends basically operates January to October. Then you have your off season. That's when your free agency period is. That's when teams are acquiring new talent, making roster swaps, and so on. In the same way, many of the other leagues like Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, and many others operate in a near identical system where it's from the first, January, February to September, October timeframe, and then an off period. So it very much is still seasonal. It just depends which league is operating on some of the minutia around it.
Got it. Well, that was extremely helpful. I don't know about everybody else, but that is something that I definitely was not aware of before. So I appreciate you going into so much detail and really sharing that and making it very transferable with your description. So backing out of that a little bit, so we've talked about where esports kind of was, where it is now. I would love to get each of your opinions on just where's esports going? What's the next 5 years of esports look like from your opinion? Tough question, I know. John, I see you thinking over there.
I didn't want to answer like 3 things at once. Yeah.
Yeah, John obviously has an immense amount more time within this esports landscape than myself, but my background prior to coming into esports, as I shared with you guys, sports, live entertainment, and the countless of conversations I'm having with brands, and as John and Justin have both shared, it's nonstop educational, but for these brands, they're also trying to find relatable touch points. They know there's the hardcore gamer aspect that makes up esports, but there's also a casual gamer that is very enticing for these brands to want to touch and speak to and connect with from that standpoint. So I think this cross section that continues to evolve that you're seeing on the likes of Twitch, where there's live entertainment aspects being built into esports. Like there was a Travis Scott concert prior to a tournament, and these things are right merging that casual gamer to you know, the hardcore gamer, right? And so for me, I think that's what I continue to see, the evolution of the entertainment sector bringing to life, as if you were to go to a NASCAR race or to any event, right? There's the pre-game aspect of the entertainment factor of you showing up and having this experience, you know, and what happens and translates post that event. So what are these new points of connectivity to keep people engaged outside of just watching them compete? So it's this humanization factor that I believe is going to continue to happen for people to have these points of connectivity of learning and knowing who the talent is much deeper than what it is right now, outside of, you know, a couple of folks that most people hear out there from a name standpoint. But you know, for me, most of the time when I'm talking to these brands and you say complexity, and yeah, we have a Counter-Strike team, it's not like they're like, oh, so you have so and so on that team. You know, it's like, so that's the other piece too that I think will continue to get humanized. And and in addition to that, our content, like content that's being generated from these teams and esports to continue to tell the story. And you're starting to see this happen. You know, complexity, for 2 seasons now, we've created a series called Through the Smoke. Basically, it's the behind the scenes of our Counter-Strike team, showing everything that they go through leading up to competition and all the other drama and dynamics that go about with it. And again, it's us trying to create points of connectivity to humanize these guys from that piece. And I think you're just going to continue to see more and more of that, to create and generate new fans and to grow your audience in those respective ways. So that's just my 2 cents from my point of view.
No, I can definitely appreciate and can jump in just to kind of piggyback off of everything Ashley just shared. I think the key thing with esports, and whether that be on the content side or competitive side, casual gaming side, I mean, I'm the casual gamer. I've streamed myself before. I've, you know, I do follow a ton of different streamers and content creators and teams across the board, whether that be in the United States or elsewhere. But I think the idea of access and creating communities within esports is extremely key to continued success. I think to John and Ashley both sharing, you know, when you think about traditional sports or your traditional 5-star athlete right now, you know, their time is very, like, your access to that individual is so much more limited than it is in esports. You have so much more time to be able to connect with them in different and unique ways. And to Ashley's point about, you know, finding ways to humanize them, I couldn't agree more in the sense that, you know, they are, like, it's crazy to think about, but these are kind of like kids. I mean, they're in their like early 20s that are incredibly good. And I mean, I say that honestly because the talent drop off between the casual gamer and myself and them is absurd. And I think that's one key thing to think about. But if I'm looking at where it's going, I think we've all touched on it. It's kind of the community touch points, the localization of this, and creating more ways, to Ashley and John's points, to humanize these kids and to give them more time with, you know, the local community, and again, build bigger fan bases. I think it's only going up because it's an awesome and growing industry and space. But I think, you know, the localization point is one thing that teams will continue to focus on now and headed into obviously post-pandemic life, as we hope to get out of soon.
Boy, what's next in esports? That's still a very big question. And, you know, the reason it's a big question too is there's just a lot more ebb and flow. There's a lot more rapid succession in esports than many other burgeoning industries in their own right. You know, when it comes to this year alone, esports went from being kind of secondary to traditional sports to being the only sports that existed at all. And that's been pretty interesting. You have brands like NASCAR that were actually one of the most successful in their pivots by putting real traditional athletes, real, you know, race car drivers in iRacing setups, and they ended up getting on par or better viewership in some of their events than they ever have historically for a fraction of a cost. So it's been interesting. What do I think is next? I think esports will learn how to better capitalize on the far larger audience that is mobile gaming. You know, in Riot Games just announced they aren't done launching it yet, their newest title, which is called Wild Rift, which is basically a mobile League of Legends. And for those that don't know, League of Legends is the most played video game in the world. You have about 8 million concurrent daily active users, which is pretty crazy to think about. 400 million monthly active users. So mobile is a huge opportunity for esports holistically that reaches a far larger audience. And one of the specific notes of that audience is female content creators, female competitors, and female gamers. In mobile, it's actually an inverse of normal stats. So as of 2020, we'll call it Nielsen numbers from a couple of months ago, is about 37% female and 63% male. In mobile gaming, those numbers are pretty much opposite, where you have 65% of mobile video games are played by women, and it's really interesting to find ways to better access and promote and empower them, which leads me to my next point of I think more diversity initiatives will be continuing to take place. So for us at Dignitas, we're one of the first to really focus on women's teams and co-ed teams and opportunities to reduce barriers of entry. So that's something that I think we'll continue to see more of tremendously. On the live streaming side and on the content creation side, VTubers and animated characters that are representing, through virtual AR and VR rigs, the next generation of athletes that might not be willing to represent themselves physically in a world and realm where they don't actually have to. So I think those are huge. Collegiate is going to continue to be huge. It's a market that hasn't been fully tapped yet. It's one that, we now have 30, 40, 50 different scholarship programs that exist for collegiate. And the best benefit of that, or one of the best benefits of that, is you see a lot less toxicity in those respective programs, because you remove this veil of anonymity, which also means that you have many, many, many more co-ed opportunities and more of a 50-50 split in gender, which you should, given there are no physical differentiators. And in esports specifically, it should be more of an open playing field. I think all of those are huge. And then finally, which we've seen specifically from Epic Games in Fortnite and in Rocket League, is just more crossover into mainstream media. If that's, bringing esports competitors doing things with Lego or Star Wars or just major IPs, that's something that we're going to continue to see directly and greatly impact the world of esports over the next 5 years. So that's a very long-winded answer, but that's what I got.
No, all three were incredibly insightful. And I think it's just really interesting to think about, we talked a little bit about the localization aspect, which led into the barriers of entry a little bit. So it's interesting to think how esports can overcome that as a whole, moving forward. Xbox, PlayStation, they're not cheap. PC gaming, you have to have access to a computer. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that's tackled.
Can I actually speak on one more piece on barriers to entry?
Yes, please.
So I got a DM in the chat from Chirk. So I'm going to respond to your question through this, which is, how is 5G used and how does it impact the future of esports? I'm going to give one example of many, which is barrier to entry. So 5G enables the transfer of large amounts of data in a shorter amount of time. One of the things that means is you can have things called cloud-based computers, where you can log in from, let's call it a not so great computer that costs a lot less, maybe $100, $200, and through 5G have access to the same equipment, technology, and speed through cloud computing and edge computing that you would if it was a $3,000 PC. Now, how does this impact esports? Well, to me, one of the most exciting things is that means every low budget computer lab in a library in a high school, middle school, elementary school suddenly has the same technological capabilities as the most high-end PCs in the world, which means that every single institution that has access to computers that have this capability can increase potential player base of any respective game. So if we're saying, hey, all of these major amazing talents that are undiscovered because they happen to be in a lower income area or what have you, regardless of their barriers, those are then superseded by 5G capabilities, allowing them that path to entry, which means we as a team can scout and discover them, which means we can create, you know, the next Michael Jordans or Fakers of tomorrow. And 5G is a huge enabler in that.
That's super interesting. I didn't know that. I'm learning so much today. This is awesome. So thank you guys so much for sharing. It's interesting how we talk about 5G in our world a lot, and it has a totally different initiative, obviously, than yours. And this is just really, really interesting. So thank you. And then I know with our last 10 or so minutes, I would love to hit a couple Q&As with you guys that we got off of the RSVP link. So thank you guys for submitting questions when you replied to this panel. But one of the questions, which I thought was really interesting, is just how does esports, that was funny, Mike. How does esports in the US compare to the landscape of esports in other countries? Are we ahead? Are we behind? How do we fall in the mix?
Can I give a short answer and take this one? Is that okay?
Do it.
Boy, so US is the second largest market for esports globally. Number 1 is China, number 2 is US, number 3 is actually Brazil. Different games have different regional ecosystems. You've seen more RTS real-time strategy games like StarCraft really popularized in South Korea. You haven't seen as many first-person shooters in, you know, the East, but that's also starting to shift. One of the biggest differences that happened when Valorant came out is it kind of hyper-regionalized first-person shooters in the West. What does that mean? If you're in North America, you play Valorant. If you're in Europe, you play Counter-Strike. That's really how it shifted that ecosystem. Are we behind or on par when it comes to League of Legends talent? We're definitely super behind. NA never makes it out of groups at Worlds. Let's go. But holistically, I think we're creating more infrastructure. I'd still say we're a good decade behind China and South Korea, but bridging the gap.
Yeah, I think John, just to circle that back around, I think John basically answered that for us, for that question, Michelle. And I know he had touched upon it earlier, just for Dignitas and teams like Complexity that are North American based, like having those relationships with other streaming platforms to grow that international connection. That's something that we were able to accomplish with DouYu, with our Race to World First event that's actually kicking off tomorrow, which is could be over the course of 8 to 10 days of people competing and streaming for 14 to 16 hours a day from that standpoint. But those points of connectivity on the international base, I think, continue to accomplish, like what John said. They're starting to make shifts, and it's just everybody coming together and having the different access points to seeing what other teams are doing and how it's evolving. And I think it's just going to continue to be the growth across the board, and people are going to try out different aspects in order to be able to reach those new communities that we're not able to tap into right now from that standpoint. So I think that international growth is another big key factor of where esports is going within the next 5 years, and how these live tournaments are going to evolve on an international scale, with North American teams making appearances more regularly. So it should be really exciting to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'll just echo Ashley and John's points there. And I think the one thing that I'll add is the availability and access to different events. And I think in-person events here in the States are going to grow exponentially, at least once we're allowed to have in-person events again. I think you'll see some of the larger, tournaments and events of bigger games that, maybe are more foreign than not, like a Dota 2 or a League of Legends, to John's point, come over to the United States in certain instances, and that allow, again, more access to those individual games and those events, and hopefully then grow the fan base and then ultimately bridge that gap. I would completely agree in saying that we're a little bit behind in certain instances, but growing fast. So hopefully we can catch up soon.
Awesome. Well, given there is such a large educational component with esports and incredibly interesting, I want to do a two-part question for you guys. First part is, how can we all, in the sports business world, stay educated on esports and monitor the impact it's going to continue to have? And then second part is, if there is a student on here who is thinking, hey, I think I'd really like to get into esports, what is your best piece of advice in going and starting to do that and starting to carve that path?
John, I think you should take this since you've got quite the history.
Boy, okay. I keep going out of my way to not try to answer things first. My normal answer is interpersonal networking, right? Finding an event with people like myself, with everyone else on the panel, and just having a conversation. I think those elements are paramount, right? What does that look like in a pandemic? Great question. Things are a little bit different. I'd normally suggest the circuit of PAXs, Dream Hacks, MLGs, everything under the sun, just to get in front of people and create those interpersonal experiences. To the same degree, I think parts of that are now easier because everything is now digitally native. You can join a panel and suddenly you're in chat with all of us, and that's very easy. And that's, there's no barriers to entry there. I'm always happy to help people on that journey through things like social media. My tag is my last name across every single platform, pretty easy to find. But really it's trying to be a sponge and absorb and figure out what core areas you might want to be in. Now, when we say, hey, esports, I want a job in esports, that can mean one of an infinite amount of things. Is that partnership sales? Is that partnership activations? Is that branding and strategy? Is that operations? But even outside of an esports organization, is that engineering a game, coding a game? Is that managing talent? Is that, again, any number of careers that exist within the greater sports and entertainment ecosystem? The best thing that you can do is just have conversations and try and learn. So many people that I've met in this space are by no means egotistical. They love to offer advice and guidance and really allow people to have less barriers to entry in the space than we did, right? There weren't as many people to look up to when it comes to a defined pathway to esports 15 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 years ago. Conveniently, a lot of those things are getting easier, but we exist to remove barriers, not to enable them. So get in contact with everyone you can.
Yeah, I think John pretty much covered it at its simplest form. Networking is extremely key. I would say you definitely want to be kind of doing these panels as best as you can in the digital world that we're in. I'd say now more than ever, at least I've found that people are more willing to accept those kind of conversations and wanting to reach out and connect with other individuals for the sake of helping everyone and get through everything that we're going through together. So I would definitely say find the panels online. They all exist. They're definitely happening on a regular basis, and there's ways that you can utilize the information there to connect with others and just try and continue to grow your network in esports and networks, again, across the board, and other avenues of sport as well and entertainment. And I think to John's point, definitely try and be a sponge. Go on Twitch, go on YouTube, and try and watch some folks stream and just try and understand what they're doing, how it kind of is related to everything else. And you'll find that you're learning it as you go. I mean, I definitely think if I miss a week, I've lost out on a ton of information, but I also know that I can catch up, and that the information is always there and always accessible for me. So definitely network, and definitely just try and learn as much as you can, reach out, and happy to connect anybody that I can.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up on that. Just echo with what Justin and John said. It's all about your network. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, esports or NFL, et cetera. That's where I've been successful in my career. It's networking, but having meaningful relationships, not just having one conversation with someone and then running around and saying that you're friends with them. That's not how that works. And even more so within the esports community, there is such a level of authenticity that is required within this community. And that's really big, from that piece. A lot of these these guys have been in the game for decades, you know, before esports was the hot new topic, if you will. So there's a lot of respect and a lot of knowledge in that. So definitely try to maintain and build that network. Utilize the fact that you're in school, that you're a student, et cetera. Those types of outreaches, they work. I love talking to students. I don't care how old you are from a student standpoint, right? Like it's great because you're wanting to learn. The other thing too, LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn can sometimes be considered old school, but I'll tell you what, you start following all the right esports publications, Esports Insider, Esports Observer, you start following different teams, the CEOs of different teams on LinkedIn. YouGov, Nicole Pike puts out some incredible data now with them trying to get into esports, Forefront as well. But you definitely want to follow all of these different ones because it is every day. My feed, it's just unbelievable. And it's like Justin said, shoot, if I went a week without following things, I think I would be lost. Like you lost out on a year when it comes to what can translates within the esports world in 24 hours. So yeah, just be a sponge, get that network, find a couple of allies in your corner and keep digging in.
Well, thank you guys so much. And if anyone was on our Building a Meaningful Network and First Impressions panel back in the beginning of the fall, there's LinkedIn again for you. So we harp on the importance of LinkedIn on these. I close out every single one with the same thing. Connect with us all on LinkedIn. Stay connected. Ashley, John, Justin, thank you so much. This was amazing, so insightful, and we so appreciate your time chatting through all of this. And I know I learned a lot. I hope you guys did too. I see lots of positive emojis there and reactions, so appreciate it. We will let you guys go. Keep an eye out for our spring seminar. We're going to be doing another one of these, so I hope we see you all back here. I see some familiar faces the whole fall, so appreciate you guys. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.